Welcome, everyone, to this conversation about rest, why it's important, and why it's so hard to get it and how to get more of it. I am really delighted to have us all here today to talk about this, to explore this. And before we get started, we're just going to have a really brief couple of minutes of meditation to help ourselves settle in to the present moment with one another. So just go ahead and uh, check how comfortable you are. See if you can allow yourself to be a little bit more comfortable. And then if you like, you can close your eyes or just lower them. And just take 3 deep breaths. With each exhale, just releasing a little bit more into the support beneath you. You can even let those exhales out as sighs if you wish. And then feel the full length of your spine, just creating space from your tailbone all the way up your back. And then release into a position that just feels upright but relaxed. And feel your breath moving in and out of your body. See if you can follow your breath from the moment that it enters your body all the way to the top of the inhale and all the way back out. Just a few more breaths. And then go ahead and open your eyes. Come back into the space where you are. Back to the group. All right. So to start our conversation, I would love to hear from each of you, Jonathan, Tessa, and Andrea, a bit about who you are. Introduce yourselves to the group. So Tessa, why don't you start us off?
Grab a sip of tea quick. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for hosting this, as always. My name is Tessa Jonson. I am a teacher here at Within, and I found the meditation world from the yoga world. So I came from a physical asana practice of the last 10, 12 years. And when you dive deep enough into yoga, eventually you find out that it's really all about meditation. So I've kind of been bridging that gap between movement and stillness for a while. And the further I get into it, the more I realize that I'm just craving that stillness now. So I've really developed a specialized skill, I suppose, in teaching a style of meditation called Yoga Nidra, which is yogic sleep. So kind of why I'm really excited for this conversation about rest, because it's pretty much the least amount of doing that you can possibly do within meditation, at least that I've come across. And I'm really passionate about sharing that with other people because I think it's just what we need more of right now. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to share this time with you all.
Thank you, Tessa. How about you, Andrea?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Stern, and I um, co-founded Satori Yoga Studio, which was a yoga studio in the financial district. And that's where I met Hannah and the team from within. And I ran Satori for about 16 years until March of 2020. And then we had to shut down the physical space. And at that time, I helped to co-found Tendwell Collective, which is an online platform right now focused on making yoga, meditation, and other wellness modalities accessible to people who haven't traditionally been marketed to or had access to for any number of reasons, because they're in a larger body, because they're in a browner body, because they're in an older body. So that has been my focus for the past couple years. And, I actually sort of refined my rest practice and realized how rest deprived I was during the pandemic, when everything shut down and I wasn't going into the studio every day. And so I have definitely learned a lot about rest and the need for rest and in society and in my life since 2020. So I'm really happy to be here and to be having this conversation as well.
Thank you, Andrea. How about you, Jonathan?
Hi, everybody. I'm enjoying being here with you. Thanks for joining. I've been actually, I think I just saw a notice that it's my 2nd anniversary this week with Within. How time flies. I met Hannah and Within several years before that, actually. I was just beginning to start a residential practice center up in Ukiah, California. It's about 2 hours north of San Francisco. And we had a few great years of doing that until COVID made it impractical to live and practice in person together. Since then, I've been teaching meditation online for places like Within and leading a small community called Sugar Plum Sangha and offering my own courses and things like that for a small company called Keeping the Dharma, which I founded. I got my start in meditation and teaching back in 2007. I found the Plum Village community of engaged Buddhism, and that's the community that has maintained and lives the teachings of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. I took roots there and ordained in the lay community in 2013, and have branched out from there to be deeply inspired by teachings and practices from early Buddhism and behavioral science as well. So I really enjoy integrating and combining all those things to hopefully offer some tools and strategies for living deeply with resilience, fulfillment, and satisfaction in today's modern world. These days, I'm getting back into being in person with people again in a mindfulness context. So I'm teaching in our local area to martial arts communities, along with teaching some Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu, and spending a lot of time on the mat also, getting my body worked over and learning how to put some of these mindfulness principles into practice when the pressure is really on. So that's it. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you all for sharing where you are in your journeys and how you found Within. I'm so delighted that you're all a part of what we do at Within. So let's get started talking about rest. I would love to hear from each of you your perspective on what is rest? What is it to rest? And maybe it's helpful to say what it isn't for you. And why do you think it's so hard, so challenging to get the rest that you need? Who would like to start with an answer to that question?
I'll start. That's a great question, Hannah. Thanks so much for bringing it into the space. So for me, I believe that rest is sleep is definitely sorry about that. Sleep is a very important aspect of rest for me. And I had a lot of trouble sleeping for many, many, many years of my life. And so now I definitely see it more as time when I can just turn off everything. And because sometimes I still do have insomnia, and instead of being upset with myself about not sleeping, I just say rest is lying here. This is my meditation. This is, you know what I mean? It's just like I can actually take my head, my brain to a place that feels more peaceful even when I'm not sleeping. Whereas before it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get up at 6 a.m. and I'm not sleeping. You know what I mean? So that I definitely feel like has shifted for me for sure. And for, for myself, I think part of the reason why I haven't in the past, especially gotten the rest that I need is because of like the stresses of survival in the modern day world at the end of the day. Like I definitely feel like, it's different for everyone, but for myself personally, running a business, even a wellness business in San Francisco was very, very challenging. And, I had people who were relying on me to pay them every month. I had people who were relying on me to pay large sums of rent every month. And I was trying to do that in a way that was, in alignment and in integrity with who I was and the work that I was trying to do. And so I never even realized how sleep deprived I was until the shutdown happened. Because I just thought it was life. Like, that's just what you have to do in order to be able to, be a mom and to have a family and have a business and have social commitments and friendships and that type of stuff. So I definitely look at it from the standpoint of the fact that we have created as a species a life that is not sustainable. You know what I mean? A speed at which we're expected to respond that is not sustainable. And what I was hearing in conversations that I was having with people in my life is that so many of them were tired. Like, that was the thing. Like, gosh, I'm just so exhausted, even during the pandemic. When we were home all day, and the thought was that you'd be able to sleep more, but it still was like, for many of us, that meant that we had even more responsibilities. And so I think in developing a rest practice for myself, I just had to give up a lot. I had to just like let go of a lot of the, extra added responsibilities that I was, trying to pursue. And just take a deeper look within at, what was really, really important to me and how I could give that my full presence and attention, and getting away from the multitasking that I was doing. So sorry, that felt like a long answer, but I think that's my definition of rest and why it was so hard for me to get it.
I love that. Thank you, Andrea. And it's so especially fascinating to me what you were pointing out about how when we sometimes it takes an enormous life-changing event like the pandemic to make us realize what was happening habitually that we couldn't even see without it being completely disrupted. Um, uh, and I'm curious to hear from Tessa and Jonathan as you share what you think rest is and why it's hard to get it, sort of what has helped you realize as well, what where you were blocked and didn't realize that you were that you weren't giving yourself what you needed. I'd love to hear more about that. Who would like to go next? Tessa?
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. I definitely resonate with you, Andrea, with sleep. I mean, I think, yeah, resting is certainly sleep. And I fully am on board with that. And I think that is one of the best ways that we can get more rest is just by sleeping more. It's wonderful to sleep as much as we actually need to. Um, and then I guess for me as well, I expand it. I think resting it for me is being, whenever there's a time of being rather than doing. I think that's really the kind of duality that I play with. So whenever there's the time of just not feeling like there's something on my to-do list, like I should be doing something else, like just that contentment that comes with just letting things be and letting myself be. That's, I think, when I find rest. So sometimes that even could be like in a flow state, when I'm doing some artwork or some sewing project. I really like to make things with my hands. Like that can be really restful for me, even though I am still actively doing something. I think it's more to do with my mental state than anything else. Of just when my mind is so focused on the present moment that I am just in it rather than out of it, rather than somewhere else. So that's kind of what rest is to me, is when I'm just fully absorbed, and not distracted. And I think it's so tough to do because we weren't taught. We were taught how to do. We were taught how to be productive. We were taught how to make money and to get a job and to find a partner. We weren't taught how to be ourselves, just to be without the doing part of it. And then personally, that looked like a lack of self worth for me. I didn't think for a long time, and I'm still unpacking it, but just what I brought to the table, what I produced, what I created, that's when I was worthy of love. That's when my worth was higher than just accepting it. Like, no, I deserve love just because I am. Um, so and I think a lot of people struggle with that as well. Just that we're taught, you got to get the good grade and then I'll love you. You got to be a good girl and then I'll love you. So that conditional love that unfortunately a lot of us are brought up with is just so indoctrinated into us from such an early age, and we're not taught to do anything else. So I think that's I think that's a big part of why it's so difficult. It's just because we don't know how. Like we have to learn, or unlearn in a lot of respects as well. Um, yeah, I think I'll pause there because I'm curious to hear what Jonathan has to say.
I appreciate those questions, I think, because they're so um, interrelated. When I notice what rest really is for me, then I also can realize what the obstacle to getting it is. I also appreciate the questions because on one level, it seems very obvious when I hear the question, what is rest? Very familiar and stereotypical things come to mind. But when I stay with it for just a little bit longer, it deepens into something else. So to me, rest is a potential in the moment. It's not something that I'm either doing or not doing, but is a quality that can be present in whatever activity I'm doing. So I was appreciating what Tessa was saying about being fully absorbed in something. I think mindfulness is the key. So big surprise, but with mindfulness, I can notice things like, oh, I can do jujitsu for hours and hours and hours before I get tired. But I get tired after just 10 minutes of doing my taxes. What is that about? So the reason, basically, the opposite of rest is the mind being scattered and searching for something. And I think part of this comes to us from our culture, the things we're taught as we're socialized, but it's also part of our evolutionary inheritance. We're here because our ancestors had this quality that that constantly compelled them to make their environment safer, to store up more food, more wealth, more social relationships. And the people who had those tendencies were the people who survived to pass on their genes and those tendencies on to us. So it is helpful to remember that this compulsion, it has a purpose, and can be channeled skillfully, and also is not something to beat ourselves up about. So one of the things I like to tell people is, even if you just stop worrying about getting enough rest, you'll already be getting more rest. Another thing is, I find it kind of counterproductive to make demands of rest on people. You know, there are people out there who have to work 2 jobs to support their family. So how do I tell them, like, what you need is just more downtime to just be and to do nothing? It's really not a realistic ask to make of people. And for me, I notice it's not something I really want to do either. So I'm busy from 8 in the morning till 9:30 at night. You know, I'm doing ceramics, and I'm teaching meditation, and I'm doing jujitsu, and I'm trying to run a business, and I'm in a romantic partnership too. These are all things that I love to be doing. And when people tell me you have to rest more, I think, why? So, but again, it's because they think their idea of rest is maybe sitting still, watching a movie or things like that. And I notice when I tend to do those things, I don't tend to feel that rested, because what I'm not doing is restraining my mind. So it's important to notice how rest should lead to a sense of restoration, refreshment, and rejuvenation. And that could look different from person to person. I'm restored after an hour and a half of jujitsu practice, or 3 hours in the ceramic studio, or recording a meditation that I'm really proud of and eager to offer other people. Being at home and just surfing the internet, or, you know, scrolling YouTube or Instagram, or my body is not active, but I always feel more tired and more drained after those things. So what is this difference in the way that the mind is acting in those moments? And that's why a very important part of the early Buddhist path is renunciation. So we have to realize that there are just some things that are not worth doing. And we'd like to, especially today's culture likes to frame mindfulness as something that's very open, saying yes instead of no. But there are some things that we have to learn to say no to, like, that's not worth my time and energy right now. And instead, why don't I focus on what's really important? And as I do more and more, I'm able to manage my energy and resources more effectively. So I can be effective and efficient throughout the day, doing what I love. I'm moving, but at the same time, I don't have the same spiritual or emotional drain that I do when my mind is scattered, when I'm constantly wanting to be somewhere other than where I am, or doing something other than I am doing. That doesn't mean that I should only do the things that I like doing. It means that, how do I bring a quality of attention to what I'm doing in a way that's open and curious and investigating, and also learning to enjoy things that I haven't learned to enjoy before. So that's what comes to mind in this moment. Thanks.
I love something that's coming through for me from what all three of you have said, is this pausing to notice what is actually serving me. Like, what is actually nourishing me, actually providing me with rest, like you were just talking about, Jonathan, and acknowledging that we can't just assume that things that other people label as whatever, restful, nourishing, insert word here, is going to be true for us, and that there's a need to listen more deeply within ourselves to be able to even begin to recognize, oh, wow, when I'm scrolling through social media, that isn't restful for me, huh? Maybe I should do less of it, or maybe pick something else if that's not actually giving me what I need in the moment. And I'm curious to hear from the three of you. How would you recommend that people who are trying to get more rest, who are trying to figure this out, what they need in order to feel more rested, what are some suggestions that you would have to them for ways that they can gain insight into what they need to rest, or paths that they can explore in that direction?
I just kind of inspired from what Jonathan was just talking about, and I guess your um, takeaway too there, Hannah, of like getting to know ourselves because we're all so different. And one of the MBSR, the mindfulness based stress reduction in the 8-week program, they do a time audit. And I think that was really enlightening for me, where you just briefly take note of everything you're doing and how you feel afterwards. How you're, whether you're feeling any pain or whether you're feeling really rested, or you can just kind of put a couple notes down or do a 1 to 10 scale, and kind of do that for a week and just see, like, do I feel a lot worse after watching the news, or do I feel a lot better after watching the news? Maybe it's obviously different for whoever. So you can kind of start to understand yourself a bit more, because I think a lot of times we're just not very good at anticipating how we're going to feel after we do something. No one wants to go work out. That's kind of a given. But after we go do it, pretty much everyone feels better, right? So it's that like joy gap almost, I've heard it called, of thinking we're going to really despise something, doing it, and then feeling so much better afterwards. So if we can kind of evaluate that over a short amount of time, you might be able to just get some insights into what does make you feel more rested, what does make you feel rejuvenated, and what sucks your energy, what makes you feel depleted and malnourished, I guess. And that can be really helpful just to understand ourselves better, rather than like going on the autopilot and be like, well, everyone says stop watching TV, so I'm just going to stop watching TV, rather than actually looking at it for ourselves to see, is that appropriate for me or not?
Well, a couple things come to my mind. One is I would suggest exploring with monotasking. And we never actually only do one thing, excuse me, one thing at a time, but simple things like when you're eating, just eat. Maybe let go of watching any media or even reading any media, and just eat. Or when you're folding laundry or doing your dishes, maybe turn off the podcasts. Or when you're driving. Even lately, I've even been working out without music, which is something I thought was impossible. But I notice, and I work out early in the morning too, so I really have learned to enjoy that. I'm lifting weights in the loft of this barn that's on our property as the sun comes up, and it's pretty hard on my body, but my mind is so refreshed and awake by the end of it. Another thing is to create short, and then from there elongate the spaces in your mind. So one tool I think is really helpful is to program, and there are apps for this, a mindfulness bell in your phone, something like every 15, 20 minutes or an hour, you'll hear the sound of a bell. And when you hear that sound, just stop and breathe consciously in and out 3 times. And as you get good at stopping and breathing with that, see if you can start to allow that silence in your mind to lengthen until you notice the next sound of the bell. And you're like, oh yeah, my mind was scattered again. And then you just come back. And once that becomes a practice and a skill, you'll notice how restful it is to have the space in your mind to be with what your body is doing. And when your mind is with what your body is doing, you conserve a lot more energy. You'll notice your movements become slower, more graceful. You'll look like a dancer. There's a sense of dignity and poise that comes with that kind of deliberate movement and conservation of energy. So I think the mindfulness bell is like getting your foot in the door towards that way of being and being unified in body, speech, mind, and energy.
I think for myself, one of the things that I had to do was I had to understand that our society and the world that we live in is not set up to have us be rested at the end of the day. I believe that a lot of the ways of being that we've just sort of become accustomed to are really because we're too busy to think about how we could make them different. So I definitely believe that realizing that it's not necessarily you. The reason that you feel so exhausted is because life is exhausting at the end of the day. And it's not necessarily any moral failing or something that you have done or that you need to change about yourself. The one thing I would recommend is maybe creating times in the month or the week or the year to take technology breaks, to just get off of technology, because I think for many of us that can be a hindrance to and I'm not a meditation teacher, so I'm not enlightened by any means. So I definitely scroll and do all the things. So I'm giving myself breaks from email and social media and Netflix and that type of stuff, I think has really helped me to realize what's possible when I do shut down or shut out the outside world and just focus inward. So I definitely think that is a great thing to try to do as well. Technology breaks are awesome. Sabbaticals are really helpful.
I love that, Andrea. It's reminding me that there was during the pandemic, during lockdown, when we were so, at least I found myself using technology even more because it was the only way to connect out with the outside world. Um, and I remember coming to a conclusion about a month in that I needed to have a day when I did not go on anything. Like much more so than when I used to have sort of a more bigger mix of things that happened in my life. I'm like, I have to take Saturdays. I have to be a day when I just don't. And it never ceased to amaze me how truly, like, I was pretty radical about it, and I didn't even use my phone. So I didn't have texts. I was just with my family on those Saturdays. And like you said, I was amazed at how it opened up possibilities for other things that I could be spending my energy on. Um, and how rejuvenated I felt afterwards. And I think what's coming up for me as we're talking about all of this is that one of the keys to getting more rest is that recognition of, like you were saying, Tessa, how much better you feel afterwards. Like being able to identify, oh yes, the thing I actually want is what happens when I give myself the rest or the nourishing food or the walk outside, the things that we know, we've tried, we know, oh yeah, those work. But being able to remind ourselves, oh right, that's the reason to move things around so that I can take the time to be with myself and rest in whatever way is the way that makes me feel rested. So that's what's coming up for me from everything all of you just said. And I'm curious along those lines, what do you all think about how we can balance this need for rest with meeting the obligations and responsibilities that we have? Several of you, I think, have alluded to boundaries Being able to set boundaries so that you keep for yourself what you need for yourself. Um, and how do you balance that with showing up for the other people in your lives, for the obligations that you have? Um, what have you noticed has been helpful in trying to navigate that for yourselves?
Well, it's interesting because in when I was running a business full time, it definitely felt like the pressure was more intense for sure, like trying to get everything done and make enough money and that kind of stuff. Like I felt that for sure. And I think that's what really kept me from feeling this sense of rest, because I had guilt. I actually had lots of um, guilt around not doing more. Like, why am I not doing more? And not realizing that if I were to monotask, like Jonathan suggested, that I could be more productive. But just with so many things going on, trying to constantly stay on top of them, I felt like that was a hindrance for sure. And the ability to go at a slower pace in my life since the pandemic has helped, but also now I've actually had to take on a part-time job. And so now it's like really, now it is a matter of like, okay, how am I finding that balance? How am I finding that balance? Because in some ways, I feel like time is the only thing that we actually have. You know what I mean? Like that actually belongs to us is our time, right? And the way that I've grown up, it's just like you have to. It's about making more per hour. It goes to value and worth again, like Tessa was saying. And in order to have downtime and rest and vacation, like it's something for people who are very privileged, and I never grew up super privileged. And so it always seemed like this thing that was for people who weren't like me at the end of the day. And that my worth and value was really tied to how much I could accomplish. And so lately, I feel that the balance that I've been able to really find for myself, and I acknowledge my own privilege in this, is that I have found a part-time job that I actually enjoy, and that I'm able to feel fully present when I'm in front of people. Like one of the things I loved most about being at the studio was talking with students. And so I'm in a job now where I actually get to be with people. But it's also a job that when I go home at the end of the night, I don't have to take it with me. So that has been a great way for me to find balance, is creating space between like how I make a living and how I, and outside of work. And before, it was all Satori, as you know, Hannah, was like my baby. It was definitely like my life's work and my passion. And so it was super hard for me to turn off at the end of the night. But I think that that's been a really important tool for me, is just finding that balance by having something that, helps support me, but then also I can turn off at the end of the day.
I'll jump in. I love what you're sharing there. I found that same coming from an entrepreneurial background. And I did it, side note, but my husband and I were in business together. So like just like to try to not work all the time is we found it not possible really. So I feel that. And having shifted now, yeah, it's a lot different when you're not in charge of everything. So yes, that's a good way to do it, is to not be not be a business owner. Um, what I kind of keep coming back to, at least for myself, and I think it's just true, is that you can't give from an empty cup. And every time I've made myself sick. I've like really let down my relationships. Like everything gets worse when I'm not taking care of myself. Um, which is hard. So it's so hard for us, I think, to give ourselves permission to put ourselves first. Like especially as women, I think we're taught to uh, sacrifice everything for our families, for everyone else around us. So to actually say like, no, I am what is most important. I need to take care of myself so that I can be a better person, so I can show up better for my family and for my loved ones. Um, like once I made that mindset shift of like seeing over and over this pattern that I had repeatedly practiced of just taking care of everyone else, and then if there's time and energy and money at the end of the day, then I get something. And just how run down I got, how just everything suffered. So from personal experience, that's kind of where I'm at, is that I've just realized that I have to take care of myself first, otherwise, because no one else will. Like, which is fair. We should all put ourselves first. So just putting myself at the top of my priorities was pretty radical, and really shifted things for me. And then something else that I think kind of goes with this, but just that I wanted to touch on, kind of making peace with the fact I will never get it all done. I will never do everything there is to do. Like I think in this time when we see everything, like we literally see everything that there is to do, it feels like there's like that FOMO and that feeling like I want that, I want to do that, I want to be that, and just having kind of that sense of loss almost, of like knowing it's never going to happen. There's like just some sort of peace that I've gained from that, of like not feeling like I have to do everything there is to do. Knowing that like I actually can choose what I want to do, and everything else is just not gonna, I'm not gonna experience it. I'm not going to do that. Um, so kind of just like that acknowledgement and that sense, just that inevitable sense of loss that comes with acknowledging I will never be able to do everything there is to do. That's just kind of lifted a burden as well, of just realizing that that's the truth of life. And it's only, I think a lot of it is just because we're so connected that we, 100 years ago, we never would have known what Hawaii's like, or, what all these other places are like, because we just didn't have the ability to. And now that we do, I think we just have to be really cognizant and mindful of what we choose to do, and being like just very much appreciative and present to those experiences, because we're going to miss out on so many. So let's just appreciate the ones that we actually can have. um, yeah, bit of a tangent maybe, but I think it circled back.
Well, let's see what I can share without saying more of the same. Actually, I'm glad, Tessa, you mentioned Hawaii. You reminded me of a insight I had. I was in Hawaii over January, and after a few days, I realized this is nice and everything, but how long do I want to spend just lying around on the beach? And eventually, I was looking forward to getting back to my regular life. And so the question of how to balance getting rest with meeting our responsibilities and obligations, more of what I already said about how to make the doing of our obligations and responsibility more restful. And I think that can start with letting go of perceiving them as opposites. So in Buddhism, a perception isn't a thing in itself. It's the way that we represent or model a thing to ourselves. So if I go back to the example of jujitsu and taxes, when jujitsu comes up, I have a perception, oh, fun, I want to do that. And when taxes come up, I have a perception, drudgery, I don't want to do that. And it's the clinging to that perception, this is awful, that is draining. And once we can learn to see these simply as perceptions, just habits of thinking that we've cultivated by repeating them and nurture them to the point of becoming automatic and therefore seeming real, seeming true, that drains our emotional, physical, and spiritual energy. So when something like that comes up, like when it's time to do my taxes and like, ugh, I don't want to do that, I'll recognize that thought. Oh, wait a second. Is that true? Is that real? What if I enjoy a cup of coffee while I'm doing my taxes? Or what if I do my taxes out on the porch instead of in my office? Things like that, so that we can stop thinking I'm either doing what I want to do or not doing what I want to do, or this is restful or this is not. But instead, we're focusing our energy on where it's most effective. And there are things, society is not set up the way that we would like it to be. And yes, it makes us too busy, but also it's not going to change today or tomorrow. And we can take small steps so that maybe in a few years, it'll be a little bit better. But right now in this moment, what I have influence and power over is my body, my mind, and how I use that moment to moment is what has the most effect and influence in my life and the amount of energy and vitality that I have. So how am I thinking about what I'm doing? Am I resisting it and hating it? Is that something that I have to be doing right now? And it's usually not. I can just let that thought go and bring my mind back to my body, back to the sensations. I'm sitting in a chair right now. What's that feel like? Or oh, the clicking of the keyboard. I can give my attention to these kinds of things rather than just, I hate this, I want it to stop so I can get on Facebook or go binge watch whatever show is on Netflix right now. And after that, feel awful. And then I'm still feeling awful. Maybe I'll go to the fridge and find something to eat. Oh, now I'm too full. I'll take a nap, like this kind of always running away from what we're doing. It's that running that is tiring us out.
Thank you all for sharing those perspectives. That's so helpful. And so I'm really noticing how helpful it is to hear what you've noticed personally for yourselves on each of your journeys. And then extrapolate from there into things that the rest of us can try and consider. We have just a few minutes left, and so I just wanted to ask Jonathan and Tessa and Andrea, is there anything that you wanted to say or mention that we haven't happened to wander to in our conversation? Anything any of you would like to say?
Well, Tim just reminded me of something, and that is that sometimes it can just be some encouraging words from somebody that gives us the resolve that we didn't have before. And so it's good to remind ourselves that we don't have to do it all ourselves, and that we can ask for help or let things go for others to do. And we focus on what's important.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan.
And for me, I wanted to I hate to put a book up in people's faces, but this is a book, The Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. It's a manifesto, and it's really around rest being sort of a public health emergency in America, and what might become possible for us if we were to prioritize the rest and well-being of everyone, basically, not just ourselves, but I guess starting with ourselves, and how, as a country that was sort of based on stolen labor at the end of the day, like this is something that continues to influence how we look at things like work and worth and work and productivity and that type of stuff. And those things are all looked very highly, but so many of the answers, like Tim, the idea that you have of helping people to divorce in a way that is more civil, like those are answers that actually come from like deep self-reflection. Like you looked at this and looked at all of these cases and realize like there has to be a different way, right? There has to be another way. And I think that for many of us, like the answers that would help us to find better solutions and ways of being in the world come from having a better, more rested body and brain. And like Jonathan said, from connection to community, not going home and curling up with Netflix or our cell phones, by actually like being in community with each other. So I really love forums like this where we get a chance to share ideas and thoughts about these things. So yeah, so that's one of the things I just wanted to mention.
And yes, to wrap up our time together, I just want to thank the three of you for being here for this conversation, for sharing so generously about your own experience has been and continues to be with rest. And just to share a little bit about what we've got going on at Within Meditation. We have classes every day online. And we also have two special things coming up. One is we have an in-person weekend retreat that's happening in Sonoma, California, in the middle of April. It's a weekend retreat, so you can go to work and go to the retreat and go back to work. You can squeeze it in there. Really excited about that. And then we're also doing, one of our teachers, Desiree, is leading an insight and action circle that'll meet over the course of a number of weeks to help you see what's getting in your way and overcome it, so that you're living in deeper alignment with your values and what you really want to be putting out into the world. And our circles are a really great way to be in community with other people as you're all traveling together on your journey. So I encourage you to check out all of those. And then I would love to hear from the three of you, Jonathan and Tessa and Andrea, more ways that people can connect with you through your Within classes and through Tend Well, Andrea. So let's start with you, Andrea.
Thanks for starting with me, because I do actually have to pop off after this. So we, Tend Well Collective is doing a collaboration with the San Francisco Public Library, and it's an experiential book club. And the book that we're focusing on right now is the Resistance book. And it involves a little bit of community building. We set you up in a restorative pose, and then it's adult story time. Basically, we read to you while you rest, basically, because some of the things in the book are new and different, and just to be able to absorb them in a way that that's positive. And so our next one is happening on March 28th at 7 p.m. It's free, and you can sign up through Tend Well Collective. March 28th and April 25th are the next ones. So 7 p.m. Thank you. And thank you all for being here and for sharing your insights. And I look forward to sitting with you again soon.
Thank you, Andrea. How about you, Tessa?
Thanks, Andrea. Yes. I lost my train of thought. I teach at Within on Tuesdays at noon Pacific, and we'll be rolling that one into this next phase of late spring, depending, it's kind of still winter, but spring into summer. Noon Tuesdays. And the class is called Soften Into Yourself. And I think that's actually kind of perfect, because what I wanted to just lastly mention is I think a lot of times that we're scared to slow down because we're scared of what we'll find. Like there's just that inner resistance of maybe not knowing ourselves that much, or maybe not liking ourselves that much. So the class is focused on getting to know ourselves in a really safe and cozy way. So giving ourselves a break of all the stuff we ruminate on and all the patterns and all the stories we tell ourselves all the time, and just finding that intrinsic sense of self, of who we really are underneath all the labels and all the responsibilities and all the things that the world expects of us, and kind of merging that with ourselves. So like making peace with ourselves, and hopefully that really helps people to find a deeper sense of rest, so that we can learn to love ourselves, hopefully eventually, if you're not quite there yet, and kind of remove that final resistance point to resting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. How about you, Jonathan?
I teach a class called Living Deeply for Within. Currently, that's Thursdays at noon Pacific time. That's going to change to Saturday mornings at 8:30 Pacific time. I don't recall exactly off the top of my head when it will change. Maybe Hannah does. That's why she's
April.
I also release talks and guided meditations and courses on my website called Keeping the Dharma, or you can get most of that on the YouTube channel by the same name also, if you're interested in diving more deeply into early Buddhism.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here, being a part of this conversation. I hope that you keep exploring the role of rest in your life, how to get more of it, how to create those opportunities to be restful even when you're active, and to rest without activity as well. Thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Hannah, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Tessa and Andrea for your sharings, and Tim, Emily for your attention and questions. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, second that. Thank you. See you soon. Take care.